That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Antlers, also known as the killing of a sacred deer.
That's a joke.
That's a joke. You don't know that reference. Mm-mm. The Yorgos Lanthimos film with...
Have I seen it?
With Nicole Kidman and Colin Farrell? You should have. But anyhow, this is the fifth film directed by Scott Cooper, long delayed due to COVID, which Fox Searchlight is opening October 29th, 2021, shortly after its premiere at, I believe, the Beyond Film Festival.
Okay. The director...
Scott Cooper.
What have they done?
His debut, he's an actor turned director. His debut was Crazy Heart, starring Jeff Bridges, which won Mr. Bridges his Oscar, and Maggie Gyllenhaal. He went on to do Out of the Furnace with Christian Bale, whom he likes to work with quite a bit. And then Black Mass, starring Johnny Depp as Whitey Bulger. His last film was Hostels, set in the 1890s, which I'm sure I will reference again, also starring Christian Bale. And now this genre film.
All right, the basic story. It revolves around a boy named Lucas. Mm-hmm. He's 12 years old. He lives in a small town in Oregon.
Cispus Falls.
The film opens... Well, Lucas lives with his dad and his brother, Aiden. Mm-hmm. The dad's name is Frank.
Mm-hmm. Played by Scott Haze.
Okay. So, the film opens with Aiden, the little younger brother, at work with his dad. And it would appear initially his dad works in a mine. But it's very clear once we see the dad that this fool is cooking meth. Mm-hmm. So he and another guy have occupied this abandoned mine and they're cooking meth. When all of a sudden the dad is attacked by something with antlers. Okay, we fast forward 3 weeks and we meet a woman named Julia, played by Felicity.
Keri Russell.
She's a teacher at a school. She's recently moved back to town after being gone for 20 years.
She was in California.
She lives with her brother, Paul.
Played by Jesse Plemons.
Who's sheriff of the town.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In Julia's class, we find Lucas, the 12-year-old boy. And he's very distracted. We assume that Frank is his dad who died, but we find out that Frank is not dead. Frank is at the house. He's been locked up in a room, and initially it sounds like maybe the dad is like a zombie, so he needs to be locked away.
And Lucas is killing animals and bringing them home for his brother and father to eat.
Mm-hmm. Okay. To wrap it up, we find out that there is an evil spirit called Wendigo.
Correct.
Which is related to indigenous people's folklore.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This evil spirit is what attacked Frank, and all it wants to do is feed on humans. Okay. This creature takes over Frank's body and finally sheds its skin and is able to escape from the house. Julia and Paul, her sheriff brother, because the previous sheriff still lives in town, he's an indigenous person.
Played by the extremely notable Greene.
Who is aware of this evil spirit and explains to them what needs to be done to defeat it. So it ends in a showdown with Julia and the creature where she kills it. But we find out that not only is Frank infected, but so is the little boy Aiden.
It migrates, the Wendigo spirit migrates to him. Because once...
And we're told that once that thing is killed, its heart has to go to, its spirit goes to another thing.
Like the demon in Fallen.
So the dad is killed, but then the spirit goes to the little brother, so then she has to kill the little brother. Then we flash forward some time and we see Julia, her brother Paul, and Lucas walking the shore on a nice sunny day. Mm-hmm. And then it's clear that the evil spirit went to Paul. So Paul, the brother, is infected.
Because he had been pierced by the antlers in this...
I was confused by that because he was pierced by it before the spirit left the little boy. So I'm not sure. And he wasn't in the general area.
So, no, he was. He was outside in the car.
Right, but I mean, why didn't it jump to her? She was closer.
maybe it's who's most vulnerable. Because
Sure.
Aiden, the little boy, is actually, I believe he's dead already at the time. He's a zombie as well.
Sure, but that's the end. Okay. That was difficult. So the first hour of the film I thought was excellent. And I thought this film had broken my streak of really not liking most of the things we've seen lately.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the hour mark is when the old sheriff, played by
Greene from Dances with Wolves and Wind River and hundreds of other things.
There's that ubiquitous scene in it seems every horror, like spiritually related horror film where some character with a book has to explain like word for word.
He has this book of myths and legends, ostensibly, and has it right to the page where there's this hand drawing of a Wendigo. And he just flops it down there. It reminded me, actually, it plays just like the scene in The Devil Made Me Do It, the latest Conjuring film, where Farmiga and Wilson go talk to that priest.
Sure.
It plays just like that sequence.
Okay, but I have more things to say. Where should I begin? Oh, so when we first go into the cave in the beginning of the film, we see that it's lined with like those bags that reminded me of the movie Madres.
Oh, the little pouch, yeah, the emblems that
supposed to ward off
evil, which is creepy, and we don't see a lot of the creature in that sequence. Scott Haze was just in Old Henry, which we reviewed.
Okay, when we are so Lucas is at school and he's being bullied by other students, one in particular who gets his just dessert, but. Is this a common thing where the students put their backpacks outside?
I think in some places. I think that was meant to show the kind of rural area that they're in.
I just don't understand what that would have to do with them putting their backpacks outside.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
I need answers to that question.
Okay.
Okay. I was really into the story, like, how do I say this? Felicity,
Keri Russell.
She suspects something's wrong with Lucas because he tells a story pretty early on in the film because she's teaching her class I think she's like an English teacher, and she's talking about fables and folklore, and she asks all of the students to be prepared to tell a story. So Lucas tells his story about like 3 bears and how like
a thinly veiled metaphor.
Yeah, like how the bears are getting angrier, they have nothing to eat, so the one bear has to go get them food, and it's a really dark, sad story.
Well, because he's also flipping through. He hasn't written the story. He's narrating from these disturbing pictures.
These disturbing, graphics he's drawn. So Julia is like, we have to do something to the principal. Like, we need to intervene. And the principal, who I wrote down reminded me, like, she could be like Isabelle Huppert older sister.
That's Amy Madigan, who's married to Ed Harris, and she's also been around forever. She was in Field of Dreams with...
I wonder how old she is. I bet she's like the same age as Isabelle.
Probably. But, she's looked like that for quite a long time.
So she's been old.
Yes, but it levels out at a certain time, doesn't it? She's also in The Dark Half with Timothy Hutton, a Stephen King adaptation I like.
The principal ain't shit, because she's like, well, everyone around here is cooking and doing meth, and like, if we try to crack down on these parents, these kids are just going to end up in the foster care system, so we need to like sort of weigh the pluses and minuses, I guess. So Julia decides to go to Lucas's house on her own. And when she shows up, she knocks on the door and she hears a weird sound.
The door's open.
Yeah, the door opens and she hears a weird sound and decides to turn around and leave. Like, she hightails it out of there. And I was so tickled because, the stereotype is these white characters in horror films don't know how to mind their own business, and that's what gets them killed. So I was really excited about her sensibility, like that she knew that she shouldn't be here. But then when she finds out, first of all, it takes nothing for her to believe that there's this Wendigo spirit responsible, because several people in the community are like savagely murdered. I would say it borders on body horror. Like, there's some really gruesome visuals, but it's on the news, so everyone knows that there are these killings. And Julia jumps right on into the bandwagon after old boy says like it's this evil spirit.
And that's where I think it has a really great first hour that builds the dread and ambiance. And I thought what was some really great character work as well that suddenly gets thrown out the window. And
Yeah.
it is at that pivotal scene with Graham Greene where it's like, okay, this is how we're, one, using our indigenous characters, and two, how we're just going to sandwich this into something that feels inevitable and, you know, frankly, quite predictable. So it's based on a short story, The Quiet Boy, by Nick Antosca, who's a writer on Brand New Cherry Flavor, which I have yet to see, and The Act. He wrote, or was one of the writers of that horror film, The Forest, about Japan's suicide forest we saw several years ago. And I think that's part of the reason why it feels kind of rich. And initially, Keri Russell does seem like a sensible character. She's struggling with alcoholism, because we have several scenes where she's at like the local drugstore, like staring at the bottles of liquor that she's trying to turn away. And she's also suffered significant trauma at the hands of her father, which it's clear that it was probably sexual abuse, and she fled and abandoned her younger brother Jesse Plemons. And it does so much quite well with allowing us to understand all of that. And then, of course, another key moment is that scene where on the chalkboard behind her, she's talking about emotion versus logic. And I think that's where the film really struggles, is trying to turn this into a logical scenario into an emotional one. Because what I thought was quite poignant is she's trying so hard to be for this boy what she couldn't be for her brother, and what she desperately needed someone to be for her, is this kind of savior figure. So I'm so on board with all of that, but it's like we're missing a scene where she's really bonding with this boy. It needs to be like Sigourney Weaver in Aliens with Carrie Henn, with Newt. Like, we need to get the sense of, you're going to throw it all away to go get this child that is not yours. And we really are missing that.
I agree.
Most importantly.
I agree. I mean, I just didn't... It felt like she went in, like she dove in head first to protect this boy, because once she believes that there's this evil spirit who she hasn't, or that she hasn't seen yet, when the scene finally comes where she realizes that this thing is real and her brother is badly injured, and she even says, like, you need to get to a doctor. She loads her brother into the truck.
She's gonna leave without him. He says, "I'm coming with you. You're not leaving me again."
She's gonna leave him, and then he says, "You're not gonna leave me." She puts his ass in the truck. And do you think she drove to the hospital? No. She drives down to the mine because that's where she thinks she'll find this creature. I don't know. I mean, I guess if you think about it in sort of the bigger picture, like, okay, save one life versus killing this creature that can kill many, sure. But she's reacting to, like you said, I feel like her emotional reaction to this boy seems nonsensical, because he's not attached to her at all.
No, not really.
This boy doesn't want anything to do with this lady, really.
He wants to be with his dad. There's a good scene where she's explaining, "No, your dad's dead. We found him. Or my brother found him." He's like, "That's my old dad. My new dad, who makes me kill things and eats them and likes me." She goes, "What?" But yeah, they're missing a little something there that could have made this work quite well, I think.
The final 10 to 15 minutes, I just thought, well, like 10 minutes when she's in the mine and then she's assaulting the creature. She has a gun initially, and she sees the creature and she just starts shooting.
Well, and I hate that we were told that the creature's the weakest when they're eating. So it's like, it just feels too convenient to be enjoyable. And even the twist at the end, if you can call that a twist, with the possibility that this entity is in Plemons. And I don't think they even do, poor Graham Greene is allowed to give that great of a explanation of what the Wendigo is, because it's usually like a half deer creature as portrayed in other cinematic ventures. Immediately, even before we kind of figure out, even before we hear the term Wendigo, I had in my notes Wendigo, the film by Larry Fessenden from 2001 with Patricia Clarkson and Jake Weber, which is had a much lower budget, but is better. It's well written, especially compared to this, and has a lot of very interesting things going for it. And Fessenden, I think, would revisit kind of that that lo-fi eco horror realm, as in The Last Winter. Like, to me, all of those things are part and parcel. What was I saying? Anyhow, Wendigo. Oh, now, and also the way Graham Greene explains it, it's almost like the shape-shifting thing that takes on. It's also clear that Frank Weaver is also even as he's changing, knows what is happening to him, and he's the one that locks himself. That's the other thing. It shows when Lucas is saved, we get these flashbacks that are really unnecessary, that really over-explain everything. It's kind of like that moment when Jesse Plemons first comes home and Keri Russell's there, and he's like, "Hey sis," I really hate when characters do that. We will figure out what the nature of their relationship is as you go along. But there's just so much there that we didn't need. Because anyway, the way Greene explains it, it's almost like in that film The Relic with Penelope Ann Miller and Tom Sizemore, which I really was a huge fan of as a kid. But again, the scientist that becomes infected with this thing, and then it turns into this creature that's part DNA of all this stuff, and this thing that this Wendigo that takes on all these parts. But ostensibly it's a deer. And the title I also kind of have a problem with, like Antlers. It sounds like one of those masters of horror films. Remember that horror series from the mid 2000s? In fact, John Landis directed an episode called Deer Woman.
I didn't have a problem with the title.
I just think I don't know if it really captures the spirit.
I feel like the title's the least of any film's problems usually, but I did really like the cinematography. There's some really nice shots. I think the special effects.
It was shot by Florian Hoffmeister, who also lends A Quiet Passion, the Cynthia Nixon, Emily Dickinson movie I bring up a lot.
I thought the visuals of not only the creature, but like the dad when he's in like this altered state looked really cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would recommend it. I think the first hour is killer, and I would really love to know what people think about sort of the turning point in the story.
Yeah, and
because it does feel like it threw away the baby with the bathwater to kind of go down this ridiculous path.
It did, and I do enjoy seeing Amy Madigan, and I think her death scene is quite, like, I was uncomfortable.
That lady, so the principal decides to go to the school, or to Frank Weaver's house to check on the kid, and she walks in, it smells like death, it's rancid, flies everywhere. Then she approaches this door that has all these deadbolts and locks on it. She hears someone screaming and she decides, let me open this door. And of course gets fucked up, so.
In a bad way. And then when you see her corpse too, it's like, ooh. But I think there's also a statement there too in the Keri Russell character, Jules, who's a trauma survivor, like, how they say when a bone breaks, it's strongest in the point where it heals. It's like she has this built-in resiliency that a person like the principal wouldn't have. Like these self-defense mechanisms that of self-preservation, if you will.
What would you give this movie?
For the first hour alone, I think it deserves a 3 out of 5. It falls off the deep end, but it's worth seeing.
I would give it 3 out of 5 as well. Thank you.